Brace yourself, a fiery hearing on Capitol Hill.
The Secretary of Health and Human Services doesn't know how many Americans died from COVID. Doesn't know if the vaccine helped prevent any deaths. And you are sitting as Secretary of Health and Human Services? How can you be that ignorant?
We're going to have much more from that hearing coming up. Also tonight, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is not the only one getting grilled. So is President Trump's pick to join the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, Stephen Myron.
Dr. Myron's tenure will be tainted. No one, not the American public, not investors here at home, not the worldwide financial markets, will trust him as an independent voice. Every claim he makes and every vote he takes will be tainted with the suspicion that he isn't an honest broker, but instead is Donald Trump's puppet.
More on that hearing later in the hour, but first, earlier today, President Trump held a phone call with European leaders. The topic, the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was on that call, and after the conversation wrapped up, President Zelensky took to X to post, quote, "First and foremost, we talked about how to push the situation towards real peace. We discussed different options, and the most important is pressure, using strong measures, particularly economic ones, to force an end to the war," end quote. Now, the phone call comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin was in China meeting with his two dictator pals, Chinese President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Meanwhile, tonight, President Trump is hosting tech CEOs for a dinner at the White House. Some of the names on the guest list include Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, Apple CEO Tim Cook, and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Who's not on the list, or perhaps has another dinner date tonight, Tesla CEO Elon Musk. White House reporter for the Wall Street Journal, Annie Linsky, joins me, and I may note this is the last time you'll be on this show at 6 o'clock, probably, unless you show up tomorrow, because we're moving to 4 o'clock.
Great.
So you're on one last. All right, yeah, the White House. The call to Europe today. What do you make of this?
Yeah. Look, European leaders today talked and discussed a coalition of the willing. These are countries that are willing to put boots on the ground, airplanes in the air to defend Ukraine after a peace settlement is made. These are the security guarantees that Zelensky has talked about repeatedly since we've been hearing about them, since January. The big question, though, is what will the U.S. role be in these security guarantees? And that was the topic of the conversation between Trump today when he called in to talk to those leaders, but those details haven't been worked out, or if they have been, they have not been made public. Our reporting is that Secretary of State Marco Rubio is taking the lead in figuring out exactly what the United States would contribute to these security guarantees. But Trump has drawn some red lines.
It seems to me, though, that they're talking about this, about what's going to happen after there's a peace. But I don't see peace because you've got Putin, shooting off rockets that are so far west into Ukraine that they're just 40 miles east of Poland. I mean, which sort of, not to be an alarmist, but it sort of mimics what Adolf Hitler did in the run-up to World War II. He kept moving, encroachment. And you've got Putin. He started first with Crimea, then he moved to eastern Ukraine. Now he's so far west that he is 40 miles from Poland.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what is motivating this coalition of the willing, of European nations who are saying that they would defend a peace of some type. They would patrol a peace if one is made. But you're right. I mean, there has not been a lot of progress towards a peace deal or a peace summit since Trump, more than several weeks ago, met with Putin in Alaska. And almost exactly 2 weeks ago, Trump said that he would come up with he would assess the situation and come up with some sort of next step. So we're expecting that in the next few days, that he will either come down more harshly on Russia, or, as he said from time to time, just wash his hands of this and walk away. The president likes to say that this is not, quote unquote, his war. But to your point, if Putin moves closer and closer and closer to Poland, it could very well become our war.
Trump, I have heard, reports, Trump sound bites where he says that he's just going to walk away. One of the things he says. But he also says that he can't stand to see the pictures of the dead.
Yeah.
And I suspect that every morning when he gets those briefings from the CIA is that he sees more dead bodies, not just of military, but of civilians. And he says he can't stand that. But on the other hand, I don't know what economic leverage he has, because if he starts to do something towards the oil industry, for instance, gas and oil in Russia, all of a sudden now Western Europe doesn't have all the oil and gas from Russia, which is their gas station.
Yeah, and Trump has talked a little bit about that, encouraging Europeans to stop buying gas from Moscow. I mean, this is one of the most bizarre pieces to this war, at least from my perspective, is that the war machine, Russia's war machine, is being funded by sales of oil, including to Europeans who are also spending a lot of money, increasing amount of money. Yeah,
trying to figure out
a solution to fight him. So I think Trump is correct to identify that as a leverage point. That's one of the things that this president does particularly well. And I think it remains to be seen in potentially in the next few days whether or not he's willing to put secondary sanctions on countries like India and China, which are the largest buyers of Russian oil.
And of course, Putin was palling around just this week in China with Kim Jong-un of North Korea and Xi Jinping of China.
Yes, he was. A group of and Modi of India,
which is an unusual addition to it.
Yes, yes. So there was that grouping is one that foreign policy experts have from the U.S. have feared coming together. This group of leaders. It's something that the Biden administration had tried very hard to pull Modi closer to the U.S. And to prevent this kind of gathering of dictators and of potential opponents to the U.S. Trump tweeted about it or truthed about it earlier this week, and clearly is keeping a close eye on what they're doing.
Well, I asked someone last night, a member of Congress, whether the United States was invited, and the answer I was told was classified, so I didn't get that answer. Maybe you can find it out. Maybe the Wall Street Journal can. Andy Linsky, the Wall Street Journal, starting next week. I'll see you at 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock hour. Thank you. Today, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testified before the Senate Finance Committee. The hearing was titled, "The President's 2026 Healthcare Agenda." Here are the highlights, and yes, there were sparks.
The mRNA technology is about continuing the research to be ready for the next flu, influenza, the next pandemic, and you have to do the research.
I'm happy to have a detailed discussion with you about it. You're so wrong on your facts.
You're interrupting me, and sir, you're a charlatan. That's what you are.
You're evading the question.
No, I'm asking the questions here,
You're
Mr.
evading
Kennedy.
that question.
I'm asking the questions,
I
Mr.
asked
Kennedy.
you a question.
I'm asking the questions for Mr. Kennedy on behalf of parents and schools and teachers. Every Republican got corporate PAC money for the pharmaceutical industry. Democrats as well. Everybody is corrupt, but you? Is that what we're looking at? I don't think so. And I think the issue now...
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, I think you do know what I'm talking about.
I don't know what you're talking about. I never promised that I was going to recommend products with which there is no indication.
When you said...
And I know you've taken $855,000 from pharmaceutical companies, Senator.
You are a hazard to the health of the American people. I think that you ought to resign. And if you don't resign, the President of the United States, who put forward Operation Warp Speed, which worked, should fire you.
Secretary of Health and Human Services doesn't know how many Americans died from COVID. Doesn't know if the vaccine helped prevent any deaths. And you are sitting as Secretary of Health and Human Services? How can you be that ignorant?
Democratic Senator from Virginia, member of the Senate Finance Committee and Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Mark Warner joins me. Nice to see you, sir. And watching that hearing today, actually you were there participating, did you learn anything?
Well, I learned that Robert Kennedy, who I hoped was actually going to try to advance an agenda to make America healthier, is frankly doing the opposite, that he has cut the research, that he had a lot of when I questioned him when he first was up, he didn't know a lot about the healthcare system. You know, he's 8 months in, and you don't know how many Americans died from COVID, or you don't know and this is the hypocrisy, he says, well, Trump ought to get the Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed, which created the vaccine. But then he won't say, well, the vaccine actually saved lives. He also went, another question I had was, do you know about, let's get less contentious, do you know anything about the health crisis in rural communities in terms of lack of OBGYN services? He didn't know, he said, I don't know anything about that. Well, how are you in this job for 8 months and not know these basics? And it was, you highlighted, I heard, I didn't see, but you highlighted the Democrats, but the 2 Republican doctors on the committee raised concerns as well. And again, if this guy was for actually health, I know, how you color Skittles is important, or seed oil, but you'd also be interested in, like, what about clean water? What about clean air? He doesn't push back on any of the cutbacks there. What about the fact, should we not believe our doctors anymore? The level of confusion that he has created is pretty astounding. And if you're a young family, or you got seniors who can kind of get confused, I don't know where, Greta, people will die because of some of this confusion and because of this pushback against vaccines. You and I are almost at the age where we still remember when polio and mumps and lupus and all of these things, and vaccines, the data is clear. And
I think, though,
it's
let me ask
stunning to
you.
me.
I have 2 issues. One is I really wanted to learn from there, and I thought that he didn't get to answer questions. I really did think, I wanted to hear what he had to say, because these are all very important issues, and I thought that there were a lot of senators that just wanted to browbeat him, and that's fine. I realize it's Washington, but I really think that we were denied an opportunity to hear what he really says. As to vaccines, the one thing I was listening to, wanted to listen to is for this. There are 2 types of vaccines. There's the vaccine that's made from the virus, which is what we talk about, polio and mumps and those. And then there's the COVID vaccine, which is mRNA, which is a whole different technology. And it seems to me that, the virus one, I think everyone's in agreement with. I think RFK Jr. is. It's the other one that people have different views on. And I never got to hear a discussion on that, because, when we hit our next epidemic, that technology of the mRNA is going to be an important one.
But Greta, you highlighted the Democrats. The Republicans let him speak and lay out his plans, but there was no clarity to those plans. I mean, I hope you didn't just look at the highlights, sit through the whole thing. He had plenty of time.
I watched it.
To express his views. But did you watch all my Republican colleagues who were kind of kowtowing to him? Obviously, the 2 doctors raised concerns. But let me just say this.
Of course I did. It's always the friendly party. The friendly party always gives, says the friendly speech, and you're great, and you're doing this and everything else. And I was disappointed in their questions.
But Greta, let's go to the mRNA. It is a new type of vaccine. If President Trump should deserve credit for Operation Warp Speed, Secretary Kennedy said he should get a Nobel Prize for it. Well, the outgrowth of Operation Warp Speed was this vaccine. And I don't think there's any doubt that it saved millions of people's lives around the world. It was not just used here. We were racing against China, racing against Russia. We had the best science. We won that. If
let me ask you about that.
Cannot acknowledge that. But hold on, let me finish. Let me finish. He also has suddenly cut arbitrarily, with no congressional approval, $500 million of additional research. This breakthrough has the chance potentially not just to be a vaccine, but a treatment methodology. It's kind of like, Ozempic was supposed to deal with type 2 diabetes, but now it's got a lot of people skinnier. So the other uses of a drug cure, this guy is not a doctor.
Which, of course, leads to a reduction of diabetes and heart issues and everything else. So Ozempic has had many sort of miraculous discoveries. But here's the problem. This is what I was looking for. I took the vaccine, all 4. I took 4. I never got COVID. I'd take it again, frankly, if good enough to. But my husband took it 4 times, and I think he got COVID 3 or 4 times. And so I really can't figure this one out. And that's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear that. I want to hear a lot of stuff, like, so that I know the efficacy of this.
Here's Greta, I took the vaccine 4 times. I think I had COVID 3 times. 2 times I know, maybe a 3rd time. But I tell you this, I think the seriousness of the bout, I didn't have to go to the hospital. I didn't have to get put on a ventilator. I didn't, and I have people my age and younger who I know who died early on in the epidemic when they didn't have access to this. I just, you and I, we've known each other a long time. Neither one of us are medical professionals. But if we don't trust the science, and it feels like he wants to arbitrarily pick certain things, listen, I wanted him to focus on making kids healthier. But if he doesn't think clean water and clean air are part of that, if he's not going to push back against some of the agricultural interests with the pesticides, if he's not, I'm freaking out now about all our plastic bottles with these miniature, minute plastic particles. Why didn't he push the administration to take a stronger stand on an international sanction there? That should be part of his job, right?
I did a special 3 years ago at Voice America on microplastics. So I'm with you on that. I agree with that. Clean water, I cannot believe that he's not in favor of clean water. But this is where my dispute is with the hearing today. I cannot believe he's not in favor of clean water. I didn't feel like he had a chance to answer those, at least to satisfy me, because it was such a blowout battle.
Well, I guess, I started my questioning saying I was hoping I was going to see this agenda making American healthier again. And I give him credit. Red dye in Skittles, seed oil, but I don't think that is going to cause as much. And if my comment about clean air and clean water, if he's being health secretary, shouldn't he push back against the administration's relaxation on all the environmental standards, or the fact that we're firing the food inspectors, the meat inspectors, the water inspectors? You can't pick and choose if you're in a big job like this. You got to be for all health that's based in science. And yet he seems kind of obsessed about going after vaccines. If there's more research to be done, amen. But he didn't say, I'm just looking at mRNA. We've seen in the past how many weeks did it take him to acknowledge that maybe the measles vaccine ought to be used when there was an outbreak in Texas. I don't think this guy is competent to be giving health advice to Americans or leading healthcare policy.
Senator, I'd love to have him on to ask some questions, find out those things. As for microplastics, love to discuss that with you sometime, because I'm particularly interested in that, and I'm always happy to have you on the show. Senator Mark Warner, thank you, sir. Coming up, from the politics of vaccines to the science of the shots, former CDC Director Robert Redfield joins me. That when the record continues.
Florida Department of Health, in partnership with the governor, is going to be working to end all vaccine mandates in Florida law. All of them. All of them. Every last one of them. Every last one of them is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery.
Strong words from the Florida Surgeon General Joseph Ladapo. The state of Florida wants to become the first state in America to ban vaccine mandates for children. This is not an outreach ban. This is not an outright ban on vaccines, but it would put the decision of vaccines for children in their parents' hands. Currently, Florida requires children in grades kindergarten through 12 to receive these following vaccines: DTaP, which is diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis; polio, MMR, which is measles, mumps, and rubella; hepatitis B, and chickenpox. There is no federal mandate for vaccines, but most states have similar guidelines. Former director of the CDC, Dr. Robert Redfield, joins me. Good evening, sir. And I want to talk to you a question that I was speaking with Senator Mark Warner about, the whole issue about vaccines. Am I correct in saying that there are basically two types of vaccines? There are those vaccines made from viruses like polio, measles, the whole long list, but that there's this new method to treat disease that is the mRNA vaccine, which is the one of controversy. Am I right? There are two different ways of getting a vaccine?
There's several different ways, and you point out two of the important different ways. The mRNA vaccine is a whole new platform where the other vaccines that we had before, whether they were recombinant or whether they're like polio, those were vaccines that took the virus and then gave them to the individual to have an immune response. The mRNA is different. We give the body the mRNA and we ask the body to make the vaccine. So it is a new platform, an important platform, but it is a very different technology than we've ever used prior to this.
All right. As I noted before, I took it 4 times. I'd do it again. I know a lot of people wouldn't take it again. I would never take it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's their choice. But how do I know if the vaccine worked? Or how does somebody know who had the vaccine the same number that I had, and got COVID a number of times? And even Senator Warner said that he got the vaccine 4 times and he got COVID. And do we know that it actually works? How do you tell if it works or not?
Yeah, it's an important question. I've had the vaccine 9 times, and I will tell you I've had COVID 3 times. So the problem with the current COVID vaccines are they do not prevent infection. These are vaccines that largely modify the disease that the infection causes the host. And this is part of the controversy that you've heard, where I think correctly the FDA and Kennedy has said, these vaccines should actually be used for the vulnerable, people over the age of 65, because they're at risk for bad outcome, hospitalization and death. These vaccines probably shouldn't necessarily be mandated for people under 50 or children because they don't really prevent infection, and those individuals don't have bad outcomes. So this is a vaccine that modifies the way the COVID virus can cause disease. It does not modify whether you get infected with COVID. And that's why your husband, that's why John, despite 4 vaccines, got infected 3 times, because it doesn't protect against that.
One of the I think one of the particularly good things that we got that was available to some, not all have access to medical care as like others do, is Paxlovid, which is when the virus gets into you, the COVID, it starts duplicating like crazy, and that's why you get sick. But Paxlovid, if you take it right away, stops that duplication like crazy. Would it not be a sort of a wiser or at least an alternative health thing if we get a virus like this, is to make something like this Paxlovid, this antiviral, which stops the reproduction, more readily available?
Yeah, I think it's much wiser. I've been a big advocate that we ought to focus on antiviral drug development. If you look at the influenza vaccine, which we've had for many, many years, it actually only prevents influenza maybe 25 to 50% of the time. You look at the COVID vaccine, it doesn't really prevent COVID. All right, so I do think a much wiser strategy, and you and I mentioned this the other night when we were on about my concerns about bird flu. I think it didn't make sense for us to do $750 million to Moderna to make a bird flu vaccine. I think it makes sense for us to develop antivirals that people who get in bird flu can take to protect their lives.
A lot of people don't want to take the flu vaccine. They say it doesn't work. And am I correct in this, is that the polio is a stable virus? It doesn't keep changing all the time, whereas the problem we have with the flu virus is that it keeps changing all the time. And so every vaccine that we try to get to sort of meet it, it keeps changing, and we have to keep coming up with a different vaccine because it's not a stable virus.
So there's 3 different types of polio virus, and they've all been included in the vaccine. And so that vaccine works, and it works very well once you've been vaccinated against polio. The influenza virus, the immunodominant domain that is related to protection, is something, as you mentioned, that changes and changes and changes. When I was CDC director, my first year, the vaccine that was developed for the country, it only worked 25% of the time. And then if you only had half of the people in the country who should taking it, that means only 12.5% of the people in the country were taking the vaccine. So most people figure, hey, this vaccine doesn't work, all right? On the best years, flu vaccine is maybe a 50%er. So you're right. I mean, there are some vaccines like polio, like hepatitis B, that these vaccines really work. They don't change, they really work. But there are others, and this is what Kennedy has said, the respiratory viruses that we're worried about, whether it's influenza or COVID, these viruses are changing all the time. And the strategy against them probably isn't vaccination. The strategy against them, as you pointed out, is probably antiviral drug development.
Well, I'm all in favor of people having it, being able to make up their own decision for choice in vaccines, as we deal with these very important health problems. Former CDC Director, Dr. Robert Redfield, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Greta. And I think you hit it nail on the head when you said the problem with the hearing today. They didn't allow Kennedy to express himself and have a dialogue.
Yeah, I hope he comes. I'm going to try to get him on tomorrow to get those answers. Coming up, An online real estate listing leads to a Nazi bust. That when the record continues. Israel is telling Hamas to surrender or else Gaza City will be leveled. That is where Israel is conducting a major offensive. It has called up thousands of reservists for this mission. Meanwhile, 48 hostages are still being held by Hamas. Middle East correspondent Zach Anders is in Tel Aviv, where it is 1:31 in the morning. Zach?
Well, Greta, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is in Paris today, meeting with Qatari officials still working to reach a ceasefire and that hostage deal. Israeli media reporting tonight that we're still deadlocked, no progress made. And this week it has been the Qataris, Egyptians, and Hamas all blaming Israel, claiming there's a deal on the table that satisfies Prime Minister Netanyahu's demands. Netanyahu is on the record stating a deal will only be acceptable if it achieves a complete handover of all remaining hostages all at once and that Hamas agrees to disarm and leave the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, some 60,000 Israeli reservists are reporting to their bases after orders came down this week to report for the pending Gaza City offensive. The IDF tells me today they are still in the force building stage for this offensive, and our sources indicate it's not necessarily going to be shock and awe when this offensive begins, considering that Israeli forces are already operating around the city in great numbers. This is going to be a slow push, I'm told. And the IDF declaring today they already control 40% of Gaza City, primarily the outskirts. It's a claim that they make. I'm not sure that I necessarily believe that claim outright based on some of the satellite data that we have. However, the dense urban core of Gaza City and that expansive tunnel network, that's going to be the greatest challenge of this offensive once they really enter the heart of Gaza City. On the diplomatic front, Israel continues to warn nations against supporting Palestinian statehood at the upcoming United Nations General Assembly later this month. Calls the United States has echoed. Here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio from Quito, Ecuador today.
We told all these countries, we told them all. We said, if you guys do this recognition stuff, it's all fake. It's not even real. If you do it, you're going to create big problems. There's going to be a response from Israel. You're going to make it harder to get a ceasefire, and it may even trigger these sorts of actions that you've seen, or at least these attempts at these actions.
And Greta, a report on Israel's Channel 12 caught my attention tonight, claiming that senior Israeli officials in the Shin Bet, which is their version of the FBI, are concerned that the Palestinian Authority could be on the verge of collapse, that after months of having their funds withheld by Israel, unemployment within the West Bank is rising, and the Palestinian Authority security personnel are receiving little or no pay. And the concern now is that a total collapse of the leadership could be on the horizon. Also of note, Mahmoud Abbas, the current PA president, is 89 years old. This comes at the same time that the United States has withheld travel visas for the Palestinian Authority leadership to stop in New York for that UN General Assembly later this month. And Greta, it's important to note that the Palestinian Authority, that's basically the government of the Palestinians in the West Bank. And if that was to go, there really is no alternative. It would be Hamas. It would be Fatah, one of these other major terror groups that is based in primarily Gaza, but also has roots in the West Bank. Israeli forces clash with them on a near daily basis inside the West Bank. So if the Palestinian Authority goes, that's the middle ground, or at least the international community considers them the middle ground. The Israelis still consider them an extremist organization that funds terror throughout the West Bank and in Gaza. Greta.
Zach Anders in Tel Aviv, thank you. And a painting looted by the Nazis during World War II was spotted. But where it was spotted is unusual. It was spotted on the internet. The painting is titled Portrait of a Lady. It was painted by Italian artist Giuseppe Gislandi. It was recovered in Argentina. It was first noticed on a real estate agent's website. The missing portrait was hanging on a wall of a house owned by the daughter of a Nazi fugitive. Her name is Patricia Kadjans, and her father was a top advisor to Hermann Göring. He was Hitler's deputy and responsible for the theft of priceless works of art across Europe. Patricia Kadjan and her husband insist they are the rightful owners of the painting, which they inherited. Wrong answer. Investigators also found additional missing artwork at other properties linked to the couple. Coming up, another heated hearing with Sparks on Capitol Hill when the record continues. Also in the hot seat today, President Trump's pick to join the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, Stephen Miron. He testified before the Senate Banking Committee as part of his confirmation hearing. Here are the highlights.
Your independence has already been seriously compromised by your statement. You are going to be technically an employee of the President of the United States, but an independent member of the Board of the Federal Reserve? That's ridiculous.
Dr. Miron's tenure will be tainted. No one, not the American public, not investors here at home, not the worldwide financial markets, will trust him as an independent voice. Every claim he makes and every vote he takes will be tainted with the suspicion that he isn't an honest broker, but instead is Donald Trump's puppet.
Senator Warren says, you're Donald Trump's puppet. Are you Donald Trump's puppet?
Not at all. I'm very independently minded, as shown by my willingness to stray from consensus and have out of consensus views. And I believe that, I will continue to be as independent, in my thinking process, if confirmed.
Meanwhile, this will make some members of Congress very unhappy. Bipartisan proposed legislation, if passed, will mean members of Congress cannot trade stock while in office. Yesterday, those Republican and Democrat lawmakers held a news conference.
It is time for the leadership of Congress on both sides of the aisle to do what the American people have been demanding, which is to end day trading by members of Congress.
This issue has brought so many of us across the political spectrum together because we are united by the value that people should feel that their elected representative puts them and their interests first.
This is a group of individuals who are fighting because it is unfair that members of Congress are trading on insider information and performing 60% better than most of the trading companies in New York City.
A lot of the country there's a lack of trust in the government, and this is an opportunity to earn some of that trust back.
Moments ago, I spoke with Republican Texas Congressman and member of the House Rules Committee and House Budget Committee, Chip Roy. Congressman, nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Greta.
All right, you have a bipartisan bill to stop stock trading. Tell me more about it.
Yeah, well, 5 years ago, I introduced a bill with Abigail Spanberger from Virginia. We just both had a mutual agreement that we should stop this kind of active trading, day trading among members of Congress. No problem. You come with a portfolio, put it into a mutual fund, but you shouldn't be trading equities when you're voting on all of these issues. So we've had multiple bills for several years. We all got together over the last 6 months and said, let's just put them all together, the best parts into one bill. We introduced that bill yesterday, the Restore Trust in Congress Act, and we've got a bunch of bipartisan support. We're growing that support, and we've been making sure the Speaker knows we think it's high time that we get it to the floor and that we vote on it.
How is it different from the Stock Act of 2012?
So the 2012 Stock Act was more about transparency. Important, right, so that you can see what members have in their portfolios. But because of that transparency, we're seeing a lot where you've got significant numbers of trades. I think $700 million worth of trades that were done in the last year in 2024. And so because of that transparency, it's become very clear that too many people have conflicts of interest. And people say, well, Chip, there's already insider trading laws. True.
But the penalty is like $200. It's
well,
I mean, the penalty for violating the 2012 Stock Act is really pitiful.
Correct, on the transparency front. And we just think if you want to restore trust, people have got to believe they send their members here to objectively vote on the issues. How can I look at a bill in the Judiciary Committee on, say, breaking up big tech or monopolies involving healthcare and hospitals, or maybe you're having a tough vote on the Pentagon and the budget, and maybe you're invested heavily in Palantir or in some big defense company. You should get rid of all that.
Well, yeah, I don't understand. I mean, this seems like a no-brainer because it's not like they can't invest. They can get mutual funds, as you suggested, right, or a blind trust. So who's opposing? Who's telling you, Chip, let's not do this?
Yeah, so I think there's a decent number of members who look at it as, well, our salary is X and it hasn't gone up in a while, and so we need to be able to trade in order to be able to continue to build.
With the mutual fund.
Well, see, that's my view. And I just think, look, you can ride the market up, you can leave your investments in there, we allow for that, and you come in. And by the way, our bill allows for a tax basis for you to take your stocks, move them into a mutual fund without a tax hit, right? Like, so you ride up the gain at the end of your transaction. So we think that that's a cleaner way to do it. I believe that this is going to move forward. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, supports this and has publicly said so. President Trump supports this and has publicly said so. The Speaker has said he supports it, but he's trying to manage his conference. I think here's the real trick. Those of us who believe in this, we're public about it. We're very open about it. Those who oppose it, they're pretty quiet about it.
Well,
this is a very popular issue. It's a 90-10 issue.
It seems like a no-brainer to me. You're a lawyer. In fact, you're running for Attorney General in Texas. But to me, as we both know, that for lawyers, you shouldn't do anything that has the appearance of impropriety, not even the actual impropriety appearance. And while the Congress is not, not the legal field, although many of them are lawyers, when you're trading, when you could be dealing with these issues as a legislature, it certainly does have the appearance for me.
We work with a lot of important issues, right, every single day. As I mentioned before, we have healthcare issues, we have defense issues, and we shouldn't be sending our young men and women off to war when you've got a portfolio that's gaining on the fact that you're going to be building up and buying a whole bunch of defense, aircraft carriers and bullets and munitions and planes. You shouldn't be enriching yourself on healthcare stocks. A lot of people made a lot of money on Obamacare, right? A lot of people made a lot of money, for example, during COVID. How many transactions did we see in people playing the market during COVID? I think that's all nonsense. You need people here. And by the way, there are 330 million Americans. There are 435 of us entrusted to run the country. How about we focus on running the country? And if you want to day trade, then go home. You don't have to be in Congress.
One last question. If you are a woman in Congress and you have a husband, does that impede the husband from doing?
So it would still apply to the spouses because we don't want people to sort of backdoor game it. However, we do allow for, if you've got a spouse who's got, maybe they get equity in a company because they work for that company, that's fine. But then you have to take that when it's appropriate to transfer it over and move it into a fund. We try to allow for all of that. By the way, let's have an open debate. Let's have regular order. Put it in the admin committee. Let's offer amendments. People want to tweak it, make it work better. We're all for it. But it's time that the ultimate question be answered. Should members of Congress be day trading and profiting on stock trading while they're voting on these important issues? And the answer should be no.
Well, as I go back to what I said first, it's a no-brainer. I don't even think we need a debate on it. This should just be passed, and it is bipartisan, I should know. Congressman, nice to see you, sir, and good luck with this.
You too. Thanks, Greta.
Coming up, will family matriarch Donna Adelson's decision not to take the witness stand seal her fate or set her free? That when the record continues. Day 12 in the Donna Adelson murder trial. Testimony is closed in the murder trial for the Florida grandmother, and today closing arguments after the defense rested its case yesterday. Next, it's up to the jury. There have already been 4 convictions in the case. Donna's son, Charlie, his then-girlfriend, and 2 hitmen are serving life sentences. The family matriarch did not take the stand and now faces the same fate, a jury verdict. Throughout the trial, prosecutors painted Donna as the puppet master pulling the strings behind the murder of Dan Markle. Lawyer and anchor for Court TV, Julia Janae, has been following the trial since day one. She joins me. Tell me, well, obviously, Donna didn't take the witness stand. That was pretty predictable, wasn't it?
It was sort of predictable, but if you've been following Donna Adelson and the way that she has been inside of the courtroom in the pretrial portion, we really did think that she would testify. She's someone who seems very indignant about wanting to be heard and to control a situation. So we did think that she was going to be speaking, and you could tell she struggled with the decision. It took many false starts for the judge to get her to go on the record and admit that she was not going to testify.
Well, in all the cases I tried, it was always horrible in murder cases when a defendant wanted to testify. I guess that's why I say it was predictable, because as a defense attorney, you generally don't want your client to testify in a murder trial because you hear things on the witness stand that you never heard before, and it only means trouble on cross-examination with the prosecution. So, what is her defense?
Well, her defense we heard through these rousing closing arguments today. And I'll let you know, first of all, that the jury is about 2.5 hours into their deliberation. We are inside of the Leon County Courthouse. And what these jurors heard from the defense attorney, Jackie Fulford, who's also a former judge, is that the things that the prosecution has trying to tie her to this crime just simply aren't enough to show murder. They say that she was a meddler. She was someone who was very involved in her daughter's divorce, her daughter's custody battle, but that doesn't equal murder. There are text messages of a lot of insults that she had for the victim in this case, law professor Dan Markell. But the defense really embraced that. They said that, yes, she hurled ugly words at him, but that is not enough to show murder. They also point out that there is not any evidence that she knew that hitmen were going to be killing her former son-in-law before the murder, even if she did things like sign checks to go to the middle woman after the fact. So they're leaning into the state hasn't proven their case and that there's no evidence linking her to this crime.
Well, what you say before I hear what you're going to say about what the prosecution says sounds like, pretty good case. I mean, that she was a meddling mother, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's a murderer. So what is it that the prosecution says that says she's a murderer?
Well, the prosecution, they came with their receipts. They do have those checks that she signed, and they say, why would she be the one to sign it when her son, who has already been convicted of hiring hitmen in this case, he could have easily been the one to sign those checks. So again, trying to push that she was this controlling mother. Of course, the defense saying there's this wealthy grandmother who was working for her husband at his dentist's office. Why would she get involved in a criminal lifestyle by going so far as to order a hit on her son-in-law? So the prosecution not only says they have those text messages, they spent a lot of time with the emails and the documentation of what led up to it. There's a confession they say they have. It's basically after a wiretap 2 years after the murder, where the FBI tried to float an issue to the Adelsons to see if they would start talking about the crime. And on a wiretap call, her son says, well, who's messing with you? What do they want? And what does it involve? Does it involve me? And she said, probably the two of us, probably both of us. And the prosecutor challenged these jurors to, if someone wants to acquit her, to make them tell you why this was not a confession. They say that is direct evidence that she was involved and knew that she was involved.
Julia Janae, thank you of Court TV. Look forward to seeing what the jury says. And a court win today for the Trump administration. Looks like alligator Alcatraz will live another day. A federal appeals court put a hold on a ruling from a lower court judge. The earlier ruling from the lower court judge ordered the Florida migrant facility to wind down operations. The three-judge appeals court panel in Atlanta decided by a 2-to-1 vote to stay the lower court judge's order pending the outcome of an appeal. Time up. Someone goes to extreme lengths after catching a hidden camera. That one, the record continues. What you're about to see is not an average trip to the dentist. Just wait. The Oregon Zoo hid a camera in the lion habitat. This curious lioness quickly found it. First, she played with it, taking this adorable selfie video, and then she put the camera in her mouth. I wonder what her dentist would say about her teeth. I'm not a dentist, but those fangs look pretty strong to me. Rob Schmidt tonight is up next. Remember, Monday, we're going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow night, still 6 p.m. People think news just happens. It doesn't. It happens because there's someone there to capture the moment, to explain it and share it. That's my job. I go where news breaks and give you the facts. Join me for The Record on Newsmax.